Picture this, deep beneath the ancient stone floors of a secluded monastery, hidden behind iron gates and layers of dust, lies a secret that could change everything we thought we knew about human progress. For centuries, we've been taught that the great leaps in technology began with the Industrial Revolution or the Renaissance. But what if some of the most advanced engineering concepts were actually dreamed up hundreds of years earlier in the quiet scriptoriums and workshops of medieval monks? Today, we're pulling back the veil on one of history's best-kept secrets, the astonishing blueprints for pre-industrial machines, carefully preserved in monastic archives, waiting patiently through the ages for their stories to be told. These aren't just simple sketches or rough ideas. We're talking about intricate designs for astronomical clocks that could predict eclipses, hydraulic systems that powered automated sawmills, and precision instruments that wouldn't look out of place in a modern workshop. These documents reveal a side of the medieval world that's often overlooked, a time of vibrant intellect, relentless curiosity, and quiet innovation happening far from the battlefields and royal courts that usually dominate our history books. The monks who created these plans weren't just copying ancient texts, they were pioneering new ways of thinking, blending spiritual contemplation with mechanical genius in ways that still leave experts in awe. So how did these revolutionary ideas remain hidden for so long, and what can they teach us about creativity, perseverance, and the true engines of progress? In this video, we'll journey together into the heart of these sacred spaces, uncovering how these fragile records survived wars, upheavals, and the passage of time. We'll explore the minds of the monk engineers who dared to imagine a different future, and we'll see how their work quietly laid the groundwork for the world we live in today. This is more than a history lesson. It's a reminder that innovation can flourish in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the most profound truths are waiting just beneath the surface, ready to inspire a new generation. To truly appreciate the significance of these hidden blueprints, we first need to understand the unique environment that made their creation possible. Monasteries were not simply quiet places of prayer. They functioned as the primary data centers and research institutions of the medieval era. While much of Europe navigated the instability of feudal life, these walled communities provided a rare and precious constant, stability. Within their scriptoriums, libraries, and workshops, a unique fusion of faith, scholarship, and practical craftsmanship took root. The monks, bound by their vows, were also bound by a profound duty to pursue knowledge as a form of devotion, seeing the natural world and its mechanics as a reflection of divine order. This wasn't just about preserving the past, it was an active, vibrant engagement with science, mathematics, and engineering, driven by a desire to understand the universe God had created. The daily rhythm of monastic life was itself a catalyst for innovation. The strict observance of canonical hours required precise timekeeping, spurring advancements in clockwork. The self-sufficient nature of these large communities demanded efficient agricultural and industrial processes, leading to inventions in milling, metallurgy, and water management. Every challenge, from illuminating a manuscript to brewing beer, was approached with a methodical, experimental mindset. A monk might spend his morning copying a classical text on geometry by Euclid, and his afternoon applying those very principles to design a more efficient gear system for the monastery's grain mill. This seamless blend of theoretical learning and hands-on application created a hotbed for practical invention, all meticulously documented on vellum for the benefit of future generations. Crucially, monasteries were interconnected nodes in a vast, informal intellectual network. Though physically isolated, they were not intellectually solitary. Through travel, correspondence, and the exchange of copied manuscripts, ideas and designs circulated across continents. A technological breakthrough at a monastery in France could, over decades, influence the work of a brother in England or Italy. They were also among the few institutions that actively preserved knowledge from diverse cultures, safeguarding not only Christian texts but also works from the Islamic world and classical antiquity. This made them repositories of global knowledge, where a design for a water pump from an Arabic engineering manual could be studied, improved upon, and adapted for local use. This cross-pollination of ideas from different cultures and eras was absolutely essential for the technological leaps captured in the blueprints we are only now beginning to fully appreciate. This remarkable environment of innovation, however, also cultivated a culture of profound secrecy, the very isolation that allowed knowledge to flourish within monastery walls was its greatest protection from the outside world. Access to the scriptoriums and libraries where these blueprints were created and stored was typically limited to a select few senior monks, each bound by solemn vows of silence and obedience. This wasn't merely a matter of protocol, it was a sacred duty. The knowledge contained within these documents was often viewed not as common property, but as a specialized form of spiritual and intellectual capital, entrusted only to those deemed both worthy and discreet. This created a powerful human firewall, ensuring that the most advanced technological secrets remained within the order for generations. Physical concealment was just as critical. To safeguard their priceless work from the very real threats of Viking raids, local conflicts, or even systematic destruction during religious upheavals, monks became masters of architectural camouflage. Many of the most sensitive archives weren't kept in the main library at all. Instead, they were secreted away in ingeniously hidden locations, beneath flagstone floors in the cloisters, behind altars with hollowed-out backs, or within a labyrinth of subterranean chambers and crypts accessible only through a series of forgotten passageways. Some documents were even sealed within the walls themselves during construction, effectively entombing the knowledge with the hope that future generations of the order would know where to find it. This wasn't paranoia, it was a pragmatic response to centuries of instability, a way to ensure that the light of knowledge wouldn't be extinguished by the fires of war or fanaticism. Beyond physical threats, there was also a philosophical and theological rationale for this secrecy. For the monastic mind, some knowledge was simply too potent, too dangerous, or too sacred to be released into the wider world. A blueprint for an automated device might be seen as diminishing the spiritual value of manual labor, a cornerstone of monastic life. A complex astronomical instrument could be misinterpreted as heretical divination by an ill-informed outside authority. To mitigate these risks, monks often employed a form of intellectual encryption. Technical drawings might be seamlessly integrated into the elaborate floral borders of an illuminated Bible, their mechanical components disguised as twisting vines or decorative knots. Mathematical formulas essential for gear ratios could be embedded within the lyrics of a hymn or the structure of a prayer, readable only to someone who knew the key. This practice of embedding secular knowledge within sacred art ensured its survival by making it invisible to anyone not specifically looking for it. The gradual decline of the monastic system, particularly after the Protestant Reformation in the 16th century, acted as the final layer of obscurity. As monasteries were dissolved, their lands seized, and their inhabitants dispersed, the custodians of these secret archives vanished. The hidden chambers and concealed vaults were simply forgotten, their entrances perhaps walled up or buried under debris. The specialized knowledge required to interpret the encoded blueprints was lost as the scholarly lineages were broken. For centuries, these troves of innovation slumbered undisturbed, their existence fading into rumor and local legend. The world moved on, embracing new scientific paradigms and industrial methods, completely unaware that the blueprints for the future had already been drafted centuries earlier, waiting patiently in the dark for a time when we would be ready to look back and rediscover them. Now, let's turn our attention to one of the most extraordinary examples of this hidden genius, the astronomical clock designed by Richard of Wallingford. Appointed abbot of St. Albans in 1327, Richard was not just a religious leader but a brilliant mathematician and horologist, a master of timekeeping. Afflicted with leprosy, which gradually limited his physical movements, he channeled his immense intellectual energy into a project of staggering complexity. Over years of meticulous work, he conceived and drafted the plans for a mechanical marvel that was, for its time, nothing short of a supercomputer crafted from brass and iron. The clock itself was a monumental achievement, but it is the survival of its complete blueprints that is truly miraculous. These are not simple sketches, they are exhaustive technical manuscripts, painstakingly illustrated on vellum with annotations in Latin. They detail a device of almost bewildering sophistication. The clock did far more than mark the hours. It modeled the movements of the sun, moon, and known planets against a backdrop of fixed stars. It could predict lunar and solar eclipses with remarkable accuracy, and its crowning feature was an automated astrolabe, a rotating star chart that moved in perfect sync with the night sky. This was a planetarium, a calendar, and a precision timepiece, all integrated into a single, breathtaking machine. To appreciate the sheer magnitude of this innovation, we have to consider the tools Richard had at his disposal. There were no standardized measuring instruments, no precision lathes, and no calculators. Every gear ratio, every tooth on every wheel, every cam and lever had to be calculated by hand using complex trigonometry and geometry, then translated into a physical design that blacksmiths and clockmakers could follow. The blueprints reveal his ingenious solutions to mechanical problems that wouldn't be formally solved for another 300 years. He designed specialized gear trains, including what is now known as an epicyclic gear, to account for the irregular elliptical orbits of celestial bodies. This wasn't just craftsmanship, it was theoretical physics rendered in cold, hard metal. For Richard and his monastic brethren, this monumental effort was deeply spiritual. The clock was known as the Albion, and it served a profound dual purpose. On a practical level, it regulated the 7 daily canonical hours of prayer, ensuring the monastery's routine ran with perfect celestial rhythm. But on a philosophical level, it was a tangible model of God's ordered universe. By creating a machine that mirrored the harmony of the heavens, Richard was engaging in the highest form of contemplation, understanding the mind of the Creator through the laws of his creation. The clock was a sermon written in gears, a prayer articulated through precise ticking mechanics. Its existence shatters the simplistic notion that medieval faith was opposed to scientific inquiry. Here they were one and the same. The legacy of Richard's work extends far beyond the walls of St. Albans. While the original clock was likely dismantled during the dissolution of the monasteries under Henry VIII, his detailed blueprints survived, copied and studied in secret. They provided a foundational knowledge of clockwork mechanics that would influence generations of instrument makers. The principles embedded in those drawings, the methods for calculating gear ratios, the understanding of escapements, the very idea of a machine that could model complex natural phenomena became a hidden cornerstone for the scientific instruments of the Renaissance. Richard of Wallingford's clock stands as a powerful testament to a simple, revolutionary idea that the universe operates on predictable mechanical principles, and that the human mind is capable of not just understanding them, but of rebuilding them here on Earth. If Richard of Wallingford's clock represents the intellectual pinnacle of monastic engineering, the water-powered sawmills of the Cistercian order showcase its immense practical power. The Cistercians, a branch of the Benedictines founded in 1098, were not merely contemplatives, they were pioneers of large-scale, organized industry. Their famous white robes became a symbol not just of purity, but of a relentless work ethic and a genius for transforming rugged landscapes into thriving, self-sufficient communities. To build the hundreds of monasteries, abbeys, and granges that spread across Europe, they needed vast quantities of precisely cut timber, and the back-breaking labor of hand sawing was simply not feasible. Their brilliant solution, documented in detailed technical plans, was to harness the relentless flow of rivers to do the hard work for them. The blueprints that have survived reveal machines of elegant complexity. At the heart of the system was a large vertical water wheel, its design optimized for the specific flow and drop of a local stream. This was no simple mill for grinding grain. The rotational power of the wheel was transferred through a series of stout wooden gears to convert its smooth, circular motion into a powerful, linear back-and-forth action. The key innovation was the use of a crankshaft and connecting rod, a fundamental mechanism still found in car engines today. This assembly drove a heavy saw blade mounted on a sturdy frame, pulling it through a log on the forward stroke and resetting it on the return. Some designs even included an automatic feed system, a ratchet mechanism that would slowly advance the log toward the blade with each cycle, ensuring a continuous, uniform cut with minimal human intervention. The economic and architectural impact of this invention can hardly be overstated. Before mechanization, sawing planks from a massive oak trunk was an exhausting, days-long process for a team of men. The Cistercian sawmill could accomplish the same task in a fraction of the time, with a consistency and precision that hand labor could never match. This abundance of ready-made lumber directly enabled their breathtaking architectural campaign. The soaring naves and intricate roof trusses of their great abbeys, like Fontenay in France or Fountains in England, were built with timber cut and shaped by these automated mills. It allowed them to standardize construction elements, prefabricate components, and erect their monumental structures with a speed that must have seemed miraculous to contemporary observers. Perhaps most fascinating is how this monastic technology gradually seeped into the wider secular world. The Cistercians were not isolationists. Their monasteries were often hubs of economic activity, interacting with local peasants, merchants, and nobles. It is easy to imagine a local lord seeing the incredible efficiency of the monastery's sawmill, commissioning his own craftsmen to build a similar device. Over time, the technology migrated from sacred to secular spaces, revolutionizing shipbuilding, urban construction, and furniture making across medieval Europe. The Cistercians, driven by their need for efficiency in service to God, had inadvertently kickstarted a proto-industrial revolution in timber processing, demonstrating how innovation born from practical necessity within the monastery walls could ripple outwards to transform entire industries and shape the very landscape of a continent. While the sawmill transformed physical labor, another innovation was quietly revolutionizing the spiritual rhythm of the monastery itself, the automated bell ringer. The call to prayer was the unwavering heartbeat of monastic life, marking the 8 canonical hours from the pre-dawn vigils to the evening compline. This sacred schedule demanded absolute consistency, a reliability that human ringers subject to fatigue, distraction, or simple human error could not always guarantee. The solution emerged not from a desire for convenience, but from a profound commitment to unwavering discipline, leading to the creation of some of the most sophisticated mechanical timekeepers of the age. The surviving blueprints for these devices are marvels of medieval engineering. At their core was a weight-driven mechanism not unlike that of a large clock. A heavy stone or metal weight was slowly raised by hand, storing potential energy. As it descended over many hours, its fall was regulated by a critical innovation, the verge and foliate escapement. This ingenious device, a swinging bar with weighted arms, allowed the weight to drop in a series of tiny, precisely measured increments. This regulated release of energy provided the steady, predictable pace needed to keep accurate time. But the true brilliance lay in how this motion was translated into action. The steady tick of the escapement turned a main gear train, and mounted on one of these gears was a simple yet revolutionary component, a pin. As the gear rotated, this pin would eventually catch on a lever arm connected to a hammer. This action would lift the hammer, tensioning it until the pin slid past, releasing the lever and allowing the hammer to swing forward and strike the bell. This trip hammer mechanism could be adjusted for force and timing, ensuring a clear, consistent chime. More complex versions featured drums studded with pegs, much like a primitive music box, which could be programmed to ring sequences for different services or feast days, creating a mechanical conductor for the monastery's daily symphony of prayer. The implications of this invention stretched far beyond the monastery walls. The precise timekeeping required for these automata directly accelerated the development of public clocks in town squares across Europe. The very escapement mechanism that made automated bell ringing possible became the foundational component of all mechanical clocks for centuries. Furthermore, the concept of a programmed sequence of actions, a mechanical brain following a set of predetermined instructions, represented a crucial conceptual leap. Historians of technology now see these devices as important precursors to the programmable looms and, ultimately, the early computing engines of the 19th century. The monk's quest for punctual prayer inadvertently helped lay the groundwork for the entire concept of automation. This fusion of devotion and engineering is what makes these blueprints so compelling. The inventors saw no conflict between their spiritual vows and their mechanical tinkering. In fact, they believed each reinforced the other. A perfectly ringing bell ensured the community's prayer was offered at the exact right moment, honoring their sacred obligation. Freeing a brother from the tedious task of manual ringing allowed him to devote more time to study, copying manuscripts, or contemplation. The machine, in this sense, was not a replacement for devotion but an enabler of it. The automated bell ringer stands as a powerful symbol of the monastic ideal, using human ingenuity in the service of divine order, creating technology that served not profit or power but prayer. While the automated bell ringers regulated the sacred hours, another group of monastic innovators was focusing their attention on a far smaller scale, yet with implications that would stretch to the very stars. Tucked away in the archives of monasteries nestled in the Alpine regions of Italy and southern Germany, scholars have uncovered a different kind of blueprint, one that deals not with the grand mechanics of gears and weights, but with the infinitesimal precision of curvature and light. These documents reveal that certain monastic orders had developed sophisticated machines for a singular purpose, grinding and polishing lenses to a degree of perfection previously thought impossible in the medieval era. The motivation for this painstaking work was deeply practical, rooted in the core activities of monastic life. For monks dedicated to astronomy, better lenses meant more accurate observations of the heavens, allowing them to refine their calendars and better understand the cosmos they believed reflected God's glory. For those in the scriptorium, the intricate task of illuminating manuscripts required exceptional eyesight and powerful magnifying aids to execute the tiny, detailed brushwork on vellum. A superior lens could mean the difference between a blurred effort and a masterpiece of illumination that would endure for centuries. This need for visual clarity and magnification drove them to become pioneers in the science of optics, transforming a simple craft into a precise engineering discipline. The blueprints themselves are astonishing in their detail. They depict specialized lathes powered by foot treadles, providing the consistent rotational speed necessary for even grinding. The designs show complex jigs and fixtures to hold the glass blanks at exact angles, and they illustrate a progressive series of polishing wheels made from increasingly fine materials, from rough sandstone to soft felt pads charged with abrasive powders. The monks had devised methods to test the lenses for flaws, often using them to project the image of a candle flame onto a wall and meticulously noting any distortions or aberrations. This systematic, iterative process of grinding, polishing, and testing was a form of quality control that wouldn't become standard in optical workshops for hundreds of years. The impact of their work, however, extended far beyond the monastery walls. The high-quality lenses produced by these monastic workshops did not remain a secret. Through trade and scholarly exchange, they found their way into the hands of early scientists and inventors outside the cloister. It is highly probable that the optical advancements made by these unknown monk engineers provided the crucial foundational technology that later enabled visionaries like Hans Lippershey and Galileo Galilei to construct the first practical telescopes. Similarly, the development of the first microscopes by figures like Antony van Leeuwenhoek in the 17th century rests upon a bedrock of optical knowledge that was painstakingly refined in these quiet monastic workshops. The monks, in their pursuit of better tools for their own sacred work, had unknowingly gifted the world the means to see both the infinitely large and the infinitesimally small. This legacy of precision established a new standard for craftsmanship that transcended optics. The monastic approach to lens grinding, characterized by patience, meticulous attention to detail, and a relentless pursuit of perfection, became a philosophical model for the entire concept of precision engineering. It demonstrated that achieving true quality was not a matter of rushed invention, but of careful, methodical refinement. This ethos would go on to influence instrument makers of the Renaissance and the master watchmakers of the Enlightenment, creating an unbroken lineage of craftsmanship that values the flawless execution of an idea as highly as the idea itself. Their work proves that sometimes the most profound revolutions begin not with a loud bang, but with the quiet, focused friction of glass on stone, as a solitary monk seeks nothing more than a clearer view of his work and his world. While the precision lenses and automated bells addressed the needs of the mind and the spirit, the daily survival of a monastery relied on a far more fundamental practice: feeding everyone. The largest monastic communities were akin to small towns, requiring vast quantities of grain, vegetables, and other staples to sustain their population. This immense pressure to produce food became another powerful catalyst for invention, particularly within the Benedictine order, whose rule explicitly valued manual labor alongside prayer. Their response, preserved in detailed plans, was a quiet revolution in agricultural technology, the creation of mechanical harvesting assistants that transformed back-breaking toil into a more manageable process. The blueprints reveal a fascinating array of labor-saving devices. One of the most significant was the animal-powered reaper. Unlike the simple scythe wielded by a single farmer, these designs featured a wheeled cart pushed by a horse or ox. Mounted on the side was a horizontal bar fitted with a series of parallel, reciprocating blades, their cutting motion driven by the rotation of the cart's wheels through a clever system of gears and cranks. As the animal moved forward, the machine would cleanly slice through stands of wheat or barley, depositing the cut stalks onto a platform behind it for easy gathering. This wasn't just a slight improvement, it multiplied the efficiency of a single worker many times over, allowing a monastery's fields to be harvested in a fraction of the usual time and with significantly less physical strain on the community. Once the grain was cut, the next arduous task was threshing, beating the stalks to separate the valuable kernels from the inedible chaff. Monastic blueprints show designs for mechanized threshers that again leveraged animal power. The most common design featured a large, rotating drum inside an enclosed housing. The drum was studded with wooden pegs or flails, and as it was turned by a horse walking in a circle, connected via a central pivot arm, workers would feed sheaves of grain into the machine. The rotating action of the pegs would efficiently batter the stalks, accomplishing in hours what would take days of manual flailing. Some advanced designs even incorporated a simple winnowing system, using a fan or a series of sieves to help separate the grain from the chaff as it exited the machine, combining two laborious steps into one semi-automated process. The innovation didn't stop at the field's edge. Moving the harvested and processed grain from the threshing floor to the storage barns or the mill was another task that consumed significant manpower. To address this, monastic engineers drafted plans for early conveyor systems and grain elevators. These designs often used a continuous loop of canvas or leather buckets mounted on a rotating belt, powered by a water wheel or an animal-driven capstan. This system could lift heavy loads of grain vertically into a granary's upper storage bin, from where it could be easily gravity-fed into sacks or carts as needed. This eliminated the exhausting work of carrying heavy loads up ladders and represented a fundamental shift in thinking about material handling, viewing it as a mechanical challenge to be solved rather than an inevitable burden of agricultural life. The underlying philosophy behind these inventions was deeply rooted in the Benedictine ideal of ora et labora, prayer and work. The goal was not to eliminate work, but to sanctify it and make it more efficient, thereby freeing up more time and energy for the community's primary purpose, prayer and contemplation. A monk exhausted from 12 hours of manual threshing had little focus left for the divine office. A machine that could accomplish the same task in 2 hours was not seen as a replacement for human effort, but as a tool that enhanced the spiritual capacity of the entire community. This practical, purpose-driven innovation stands in stark contrast to later industrial motives of pure profit, highlighting a technology ethos centered on human well-being and communal sustainability. The influence of these monastic machines inevitably spilled beyond the abbey walls. Many monasteries held vast tracts of land that were farmed by lay brothers or local peasants who would have worked directly with these devices. The obvious advantages in speed and efficiency would not have gone unnoticed. It is easy to imagine local landowners, after seeing the monastery's mechanical reaper in action, seeking to commission similar devices for their own estates. While the full blueprints may have remained within the order, the core concepts and mechanical principles, the use of gear trains to convert rotational motion, the application of animal power to cutting blades, would have spread through observation and replication by skilled local blacksmiths and carpenters. In this quiet, unassuming way, the technological advancements born from the monastic need for efficiency seeded gradual improvements in agricultural productivity across medieval Europe, laying a hidden foundation for the eventual agricultural revolution centuries later. The remarkable survival of these intricate blueprints across hundreds of years is a story of deliberate, ingenious preservation. The first line of defense was the materials themselves. Monastic scribes didn't use simple paper, which is highly susceptible to moisture and decay. Instead, they drafted their most important technical plans on vellum, a premium writing surface made from carefully prepared animal skin, typically calf, sheep, or goat. This material was incredibly durable, resistant to tearing, and could withstand fluctuations in temperature and humidity far better than any plant-based product. Its slightly greasy surface also held ink beautifully, preventing the dreaded bleeding or fading that could render a complex diagram unintelligible. The ink they used was equally robust. Iron gall ink, the standard of the era, was a powerful, permanent concoction. Created from a mixture of tannic acids, often extracted from oak galls, and iron salts, this ink started its life a faint, bluish-black shade. But as it oxidized on the vellum, it chemically bonded with the surface, turning into a deep, rich, and incredibly resilient black that could last for millennia if left undisturbed. This chemical reaction created a mark that was not just on the surface but became part of it, ensuring that the precise lines of a gear tooth or the delicate annotation explaining a mechanism would not simply rub away over time. This combination of vellum and iron gall ink created a physical record of astonishing longevity, but the monks knew that even the toughest materials needed protection from the elements. Storage was everything. These precious documents were not left on open shelves. They were kept in the driest, coolest, and most stable environments the monastery could offer, often within the thick stone walls of the scriptorium or library, where temperature and humidity remained relatively constant year-round. For added security, many of the most valuable blueprints were given their own individual protective casings. They might be rolled and inserted into cylindrical tubes fashioned from wood or even metal, then sealed at the ends with wax to create an airtight barrier against dampness and insects. Others were laid flat between sturdy wooden boards, creating a protective book-like binding that shielded them from physical damage and light. Perhaps the most brilliant aspect of their preservation strategy, however, was not physical but procedural, their meticulous culture of copying and distribution. A single, unique blueprint was a vulnerability. A fire, a flood, or a raid could erase a revolutionary idea from history in an instant. The monastic network understood this risk intimately. Their solution was to treat important technical knowledge with the same reverence as sacred scripture. When a significant design was finalized, the scriptorium would often create multiple authorized copies. These duplicate sets of plans would then be shared or sent to other monasteries within their order, sometimes hundreds of miles away. This created a distributed backup system long before the concept existed in computing. A catastrophic event that destroyed the archive at one abbey would not mean the total loss of the knowledge, because another copy likely existed safely in a scriptorium in a different region, perhaps even a different country. This practice ensured the survival of knowledge not just against accidental decay, but against the deliberate destruction of the Reformation and other periods of upheaval. The survival of Richard of Wallingford's clock designs, for instance, is almost certainly due to this very practice. The original at St. Albans was lost, but copies made and sent elsewhere endured. This decentralized, networked approach to safeguarding knowledge highlights a surprisingly modern understanding of information security, all achieved with parchment, ink, and a profound commitment to preserving the light of learning for future generations. But these hidden layers of meaning go far beyond mere decoration. The practice of encoding technical information was a sophisticated intellectual tradition, a way of weaving together the sacred and the scientific into a single, inseparable tapestry. A monk studying a blueprint wasn't just learning how to build a machine. He was engaging in a form of meditation, deciphering the divine principles of mathematics and physics that he believed governed God's creation. The gear train of a clock wasn't just a mechanism for telling time. It was a physical representation of the celestial harmony of the spheres, its ratios echoing the perfect mathematical relationships that ordered the universe. This mindset transforms these documents from simple instructions into profound philosophical texts, where every line and number carries a double meaning. The methods of encryption were as varied as they were clever. One common technique was to use gematria, a form of numerology where letters are assigned numerical values. A monk might calculate a crucial gear ratio, say 5:1, and then search scripture for a verse where the numerical values of the Hebrew or Greek letters added up to 5 and 1, inscribing that verse near the drawing. To an outsider, it would look like a pious quotation, but to an initiated brother, it was a clear technical specification, a coded message hiding in plain sight. Other designs might use the intricate geometry common in Gothic architecture, the same principles used to determine the proportions of a cathedral's nave, to secretly dictate the dimensions of a mechanical component, ensuring that the machine was, in its own way, as perfectly proportioned as a house of worship. This practice of concealment served multiple, deeply practical purposes. In an era where knowledge was power and could be deemed dangerous or heretical by outside authorities, encryption was a form of protection. A design for an advanced astronomical instrument could be mistaken for witchcraft or blasphemous divination if fallen into the wrong hands. By cloaking it in religious symbolism, the monks created a plausible defense. They could claim the drawing was merely an elaborate allegory, a spiritual meditation on the heavens, thus safeguarding both the physical document and the individuals who created it from persecution. It was a brilliant strategy for preserving controversial ideas in a volatile world. Furthermore, this layered approach acted as a rigorous intellectual filter. It ensured that the knowledge contained within these blueprints was only accessible to those who possessed the patience, humility, and interdisciplinary learning to understand it. A man motivated solely by greed or a desire for power would likely lack the theological training to crack the code. This system guaranteed that the monastery's most advanced technological secrets were passed only to those who approached them with the right intention, a reverent curiosity and a desire to understand creation, not to dominate it. It was a gatekeeping mechanism that valued wisdom over cleverness and spiritual preparation over raw intellectual talent. Decoding these blueprints today is therefore a task that requires a rare collaboration between experts from vastly different fields. Engineers and historians of technology must work side by side with theologians, art historians, and scholars of medieval literature. A seemingly random series of dots in the margin of a drawing might be identified by an art historian as a constellation pattern, which then provides the key to an astronomer for understanding the function of a geared assembly. A cryptic Latin phrase, dismissed as a decorative flourish, might be recognized by a theologian as a quote from a specific psalm that, when its numerical value is calculated, reveals the tensile strength required for a particular metal component. Each discovery is a small victory, a piece of a puzzle that brings us closer to understanding the brilliant, holistic mindset of the medieval monk engineer. This tradition challenges our modern, compartmentalized view of knowledge, where science, art, and religion are often seen as separate and even conflicting domains. For these inventors, there was no such division. Their faith inspired their science, their artistic skills documented it, and their spiritual beliefs encrypted it, creating a rich, integrated whole. To truly appreciate their work, we must learn to see the world through their eyes, a world where a gear is never just a gear, a number is never just a number, and every line drawn is a potential bridge between the earthly and the divine. We often picture the medieval scribe hunched over a desk, meticulously copying religious texts with a quill, a figure devoted entirely to the spiritual and literary. But this image is incomplete. Within the monastery walls, the role of the scribe was far more dynamic and intellectually demanding. Many of these individuals were, in fact, the era's closest equivalent to multidisciplinary engineers. Their primary toolkit contained not only ink and vellum, but also the compass, the straightedge, and the divider's instruments of geometry, essential for translating abstract mechanical concepts into buildable reality. Their training was rigorous, grounded in the 7 liberal arts with a heavy emphasis on the quadrivium: arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. This foundation provided the mathematical language and spatial reasoning necessary to conceive of a machine not as a collection of parts, but as an integrated system governed by predictable laws. This unique fusion of skills is vividly apparent in the blueprints themselves. A single document could showcase breathtaking calligraphy in the annotations, exquisite illustrative detail in the drawings of each component, and ruthlessly practical mathematical calculations scribbled in the margins. They employed drafting techniques that would feel familiar to a modern engineer, using grid systems to maintain scale and proportion throughout a complex assembly. Before a single piece of iron was forged or a gear was carved from wood, the entire device had been perfected on parchment. These were not vague suggestions or inspirational sketches. They were true technical manuals, specifying dimensions, materials, and assembly sequences with a clarity that allowed craftsmen centuries later to successfully reconstruct their work. The scribe engineer had to possess a complete mental model of the machine, understanding how each piece interacted with the others, anticipating points of friction, and calculating load-bearing stresses long before any physical prototype was attempted. What truly brings their work to life, however, are the personal annotations they sometimes left behind. Beyond the cold geometry, these notes offer a rare glimpse into a mindset that saw no conflict between the workshop and the chapel. A monk might jot down a prayer for guidance next to a complex calculation for a gear ratio, or inscribe a biblical verse beside a diagram of a water wheel, drawing a direct parallel between the flow of a river and the flow of divine grace. These marginalia reveal a thought process that was both deeply empirical and profoundly metaphysical. They were solving tangible problems: how to increase torque, how to regulate speed, how to transfer motion, but they were doing so within a world view that saw the entire universe as a magnificent machine designed by a divine creator. To understand and replicate these mechanical principles was, for them, a form of piety, a way of drawing closer to the mind of God by engaging with the logical and ordered framework of His creation. This perspective fundamentally challenges the stubborn stereotype of the Middle Ages as a technological wasteland, a gloomy interruption between the glories of Rome and the brilliance of the Renaissance. The work of these monastic scribe engineers paints a very different picture, one of vibrant intellectual curiosity and practical innovation flourishing in the most unexpected of places. They were not merely copying the knowledge of antiquity, they were actively expanding upon it, solving new problems with creativity and rigor. Their legacy proves that the human drive to invent, to improve, and to understand the physical world never went away. It simply found a sanctuary within the protective walls of the monastery, where it could grow and be meticulously documented, waiting for the world to be ready to rediscover it. These individuals were not just record keepers, they were visionary builders who drafted the future one precise, inked line at a time. To truly grasp the ingenuity of the monastic inventors, we must look beyond the isolated abbey and recognize them as the vital connecting thread in a vast, ancient web of knowledge. The remarkable devices they drafted were rarely born from nothing. They were often the brilliant synthesis of ideas that had journeyed across continents and centuries. The monasteries of medieval Europe did not exist in an intellectual vacuum. They were, in fact, the grateful inheritors and diligent custodians of a scientific legacy that stretched back to the philosophers of classical Greece and the enlightened scholars of the Islamic Golden Age. This flow of knowledge was made possible by one of history's most pivotal, yet often overlooked translation movements. As Europe navigated the early medieval period, much of the groundbreaking work from thinkers like Aristotle, Archimedes, and Hero of Alexandria was preserved not in Latin but in Arabic. In great intellectual centers like Baghdad, Cordoba, and Toledo, Muslim scholars had not only safeguarded these classical texts, but had also expanded upon them with their own significant advancements in mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and engineering. By the 11th and 12th centuries, a fascinating cultural and intellectual exchange began at the edges of the Christian and Islamic worlds, particularly in places like Spain and Sicily. Here, often sponsored by enlightened bishops or kings, teams of translators frequently comprising a Jewish scholar, a Muslim learned man, and a Christian monk would work together to render these Arabic texts and the classical knowledge they contained into Latin. This is how foundational works entered the monastic bloodstream. A monk in a French abbey might study a Latin copy of a text originally written in Arabic by the brilliant Banu Musa brothers, which itself contained designs for ingenious trick vessels and automata inspired by the earlier work of the Greek engineer Philo of Byzantium. The complex geared astrolabe designed by a monk in England might bear a striking resemblance to instruments described in the writings of the Persian astronomer Al-Biruni, whose works had been translated a generation earlier. The library of a monastery became a treasure chest of global ingenuity, holding the combined intellectual wealth of Athens, Alexandria, Baghdad, and Cordoba, all translated into a common language and waiting for a curious mind to connect the dots. The genius of the monastic engineers lay not in mere copying, but in creative adaptation. They encountered advanced concepts from these diverse traditions and then asked a crucial question: how can we use this principle to solve a problem we face right here, right now? They saw a design for a complex water clock from the Islamic world, which was often used for determining prayer times, and recognized its mechanism could be adapted to power the automated bell ringers that called their own community to prayer. The precise astronomical tables developed by Arabic astronomers, which allowed for accurate predictions of celestial events, provided the mathematical data necessary for a monk like Richard of Wallingford to program his astronomical clock to predict eclipses. This process of hybridization is visible in the blueprints themselves. A single drawing might feature a gear system inspired by a Greek treatise, a water power principle from an Arabic manual, and a decorative motif from a local artistic tradition, all combined to create a device that was perfectly suited to the materials, climate, and specific needs of a northern European monastery. They were the ultimate tinkerers and remixers of knowledge, taking the best ideas from across the known world and refining them into something both practical and new. This reframes the medieval monastery not as a closed fortress of faith, but as an open, though highly selective hub in a nascent global network of innovation, demonstrating that the cross-pollination of ideas is the true engine of progress, a principle that remains just as relevant in our modern age of information exchange. The story of Monte Cassino stands as a sobering testament to the fragility of knowledge, a powerful counterpoint to the survival stories we've celebrated so far. Founded by Saint Benedict himself in the year 529 atop a rugged hill south of Rome, this abbey was not just a religious site, it was a beacon of learning and a potential vault of technological secrets for over a millennium. Its strategic location, however, made it a tragic focal point for conflict, subjected to successive waves of destruction that each time erased untold chapters of history. The Lombards sacked it in the late 6th century, the Saracens in the 9th, and a devastating earthquake in 1349. But the most catastrophic loss occurred in 1944 during the fierce Battle of Monte Cassino in World War II, when sustained Allied bombardment, based on the mistaken belief that German forces were entrenched there, reduced the magnificent complex to a heart-wrenching sea of rubble and dust. Amidst this repeated cycle of destruction and resilient rebuilding, tantalizing clues about its intellectual wealth have stubbornly persisted. Fragmentary manuscripts and letters from visiting scholars throughout the centuries make cryptic references to the abbey's unparalleled library. They speak not only of theological works but of books of machines and wondrous designs housed within its walls. The few architectural plans that survived from its various reconstructions show evidence of extraordinarily sophisticated lifting devices, counterweighted cranes and hoists that would have been essential for raising the massive stone blocks to its great heights, machinery that rivaled the engineering feats of the Roman builders they sought to emulate. Other scattered notes hint at advanced tools for surveying and precise stone cutting, suggesting the monks of Monte Cassino possessed a geometric and mechanical understanding that allowed them to execute their architectural vision with breathtaking precision. Perhaps the most compelling and tragic lost possibility involves the potential for early printing. Decades before Johannes Gutenberg assembled his famous press in Mainz, there are ambiguous references in a few surviving letters to a mechanical means of replication being developed at Monte Cassino. Some historians speculate this could have been a form of woodblock printing or even a primitive screw press used for stamping patterns onto parchment or cloth. While it likely wasn't movable type as Gutenberg conceived it, the mere existence of such experimentation suggests that the foundational ideas of the print revolution were being explored in monastic workshops long before they catalyzed a societal transformation. The complete loss of any such device or its blueprints means we can only wonder at what might have been, a ghost of an innovation that vanished before it could truly change the world. The fate of Monte Cassino's archives forces us to confront a humbling reality. For every blueprint we have been fortunate enough to rediscover, there are undoubtedly countless others that are gone forever, their secrets dissolved into ash scattered by the wind or simply decayed into illegibility through neglect. This isn't just about lost machines, it's about lost thought processes, lost solutions to ancient problems, and entire branches of innovation that were pruned from the tree of knowledge before they could bear fruit. Each loss represents a missing link in our understanding of human progress, a silent gap where a brilliant idea once thrived. The story of this great abbey compels us to look at the surviving fragments we do have with renewed gratitude and a sense of urgency, recognizing them not as dusty relics but as precious, irreplaceable windows into a past that was far more inventive than we ever imagined. This persistent image of the so-called Dark Ages as a bleak technological desert, a long slumber between the fall of Rome and the awakening of the Renaissance, is one of history's most stubborn and misleading stereotypes. The very term implies a millennium of ignorance and stagnation, a void where human ingenuity went to die. But the sophisticated blueprints emerging from monastic archives present us with a radically different reality, one that forces a complete and total reassessment of this entire era. These documents are not mere curiosities. They are hard evidence of a vibrant, continuous, and highly sophisticated culture of innovation that was thriving in the most unexpected of places. What we label as darkness was, in these secluded communities, a period of intense and brilliant light. Consider the sheer intellectual ambition behind a device like Richard of Wallingford's astronomical clock. This was not a simple timekeeping gadget. It was a mechanical model of the known universe, a complex analog computer built from hand-forged iron and carefully carved wood. Its design required an advanced understanding of celestial mechanics, precision gearing, and mathematical calculation that we would never intuitively attribute to the 14th century. This level of sophistication doesn't appear out of a vacuum. It points to a sustained tradition of scientific inquiry and engineering practice, a lineage of knowledge that was being carefully preserved, tested, and expanded upon within the protective walls of monasteries across Europe. This was not stagnation, it was a quiet, methodical revolution. Furthermore, these inventions reveal a pragmatic and resourceful approach to technology that directly challenges the notion of regression. The Cistercian water-powered sawmills and the Benedictine mechanical harvesters were not theoretical exercises. They were born from pressing practical needs to build vast structures to feed large communities, and they provided ingenious solutions that dramatically increased efficiency and reduced human toil. This demonstrates a society actively engaged in problem-solving, applying mechanical principles to overcome the limitations of their environment. They were optimizing their world, using water, wind, and animal power in clever ways that would later become foundational to the Industrial Revolution. The roots of that great upheaval are clearly visible here, not in the crowded factories of the 18th century, but in the watermills and workshops of medieval abbeys. This hidden thread of progress also redefines our understanding of the Renaissance itself. Rather than a sudden, miraculous rebirth of learning from nothing, we can now see it as a period that built directly upon these medieval foundations. The geometric precision of monastic lens grinders informed the optics that would later fill Galileo's workshop. The principles of automation perfected in bell-ringing mechanisms foreshadowed the programmable looms of the industrial age. The Renaissance didn't emerge from a vacuum. It stood on the shoulders of these forgotten monastic giants, amplifying and broadcasting ideas that had been cultivated in secrecy for centuries. The light of the Renaissance was brilliant precisely because it was kindled from embers that had been kept carefully burning through the long medieval night. Ultimately, the legacy of these monastic blueprints is a powerful lesson in looking beyond labels and questioning the grand narratives of history. The term Dark Ages tells us more about the biases of later historians, who viewed their own era as the pinnacle of civilization, than it does about the actual lived experience of the medieval period. It dismisses an entire millennium of human achievement, consigning it to a simplistic category of backwardness. The work of these monk engineers demands that we replace this simplistic label with a far more nuanced and accurate picture, one of continuous, adaptive, and often astonishing innovation. They remind us that human creativity is relentless and resilient, capable of flourishing even in the most challenging circumstances, and that the pursuit of knowledge is a flame that can be sheltered, but never truly extinguished. This profound engagement with the ethics of their craft reveals a dimension of monastic innovation that goes far beyond mere mechanics. These monk engineers were not just asking, can we build it, but should we build it, and what does building it mean for our souls? This introspection is visible in the margins of their work, where technical diagrams are often accompanied by philosophical musings. In one remarkable example, a blueprint for an automated grain mill includes a note in tiny, precise script questioning whether reducing the physical labor of the brothers might inadvertently diminish the spiritual value of their work, the sanctification of daily toil that was central to their rule. Another design for a complex water clock features a cautionary reminder that while the machine might measure the hours, It must not become an object of vanity or pride that distracts from the divine purpose those hours were meant to serve. This tension between efficiency and devotion created a unique technological ethos. The goal was never automation for its own sake, but what we might now call appropriate technology innovation that served a specific human and spiritual need without creating unintended negative consequences. A machine was considered successful not if it eliminated human effort entirely, but if it reallocated that effort toward higher purposes. Freeing a brother from the tedium of manually grinding grain for hours meant he could dedicate that time to copying sacred texts, studying scripture, or deep prayer. The value was measured in spiritual currency, not just gains in productivity. This stands in stark contrast to the industrial mindset that would emerge centuries later, where the primary measures of a technology's success became profit, output, and the displacement of labor. Their philosophical concerns extended beyond the monastery walls to consider humanity's relationship with nature itself. Many of these inventors operated within a worldview that saw the natural world as God's creation, not a resource to be dominated and exploited without limit. This perspective is evident in designs for water-powered systems that show remarkable consideration for the local ecosystem. Blueprints often include instructions for building fish ladders alongside mill races, or for ensuring that a dam's construction would not completely alter the flow of a river downstream. They sought to harness natural forces with what we would now call sustainability, working with the grain of creation rather than against it. This respectful approach to technology stands as a powerful alternative to the conquer nature mentality that has driven so much of modern industrialization. The most fascinating aspect of this ethical dimension is how personal and nuanced it was. We find evidence of lively debates within and between different monastic orders about these very issues. The Cistercians, with their vast agricultural and industrial operations, generally embraced labor-saving technology as enabling their mission. Meanwhile, some more contemplative branches expressed skepticism, worrying that too much mechanical convenience might create a spirit of comfort and attachment that was incompatible with their vows of poverty and simplicity. These weren't abstract academic debates. They were practical discussions that directly influenced which technologies were adopted and how they were implemented. The surviving correspondence between abbots reveals a sophisticated discourse about the moral character of technology that we are only now, in the 21st century, beginning to have with similar seriousness regarding artificial intelligence and biotechnology. This legacy offers us a crucial mirror for examining our own relationship with technology today. In our rush toward constant innovation and disruption, we rarely pause to ask the fundamental questions that these medieval monks grappled with so deeply. What human values are we encoding into our algorithms? What aspects of our humanity might we be inadvertently diminishing in our pursuit of efficiency? The monastic approach reminds us that technology is never neutral. It always carries the values and assumptions of its creators. Their careful, value-driven innovation challenges us to move beyond asking merely what technology can do, and to insist on asking what technology should do and for whose benefit. In their marginal notes and philosophical debates, we find an invitation to build a technological future that serves human flourishing in its fullest sense, not just bottom lines and convenience. For centuries, these incredible archives slumbered in perfect obscurity, their very existence fading into little more than whispered legend. The systematic hunt to bring them back into the light truly began to gain momentum in the 19th century, sparked not by treasure hunters, but by a new breed of historian. These were scholars who began to look past the grand narratives of kings and battles, developing a fresh fascination with the daily life and material culture of the medieval world. They started to approach ancient monastery libraries and the ruins of abandoned abbeys not as mere repositories of religious texts, but as crime scenes of intellectual history, searching for clues about how people actually lived, worked, and thought. This shift in perspective was everything. Instead of skimming manuscripts solely for theological commentary or beautiful illuminations, they began to carefully examine the often dismissed marginalia, the seemingly mundane diagrams, and the cryptic notebooks tucked away in forgotten corners. They realized that the most revolutionary ideas weren't always in the main text. Sometimes they were hiding in the scribbles on the side. This painstaking work entered an entirely new dimension with the dawn of advanced imaging technologies in the late 20th and 21st centuries. Many of the most valuable vellum documents had been scraped clean and reused in a process called palimpsest, their original technical drawings overwritten with later, often religious, texts. Others had simply faded with time, their iron gall ink now appearing as faint brown stains indistinguishable from the aging parchment itself. This is where modern science performed miracles. Tools like multispectral imaging allow conservators to photograph a page under different wavelengths of light, from ultraviolet to infrared. Each wavelength causes the various chemicals in the ink and parchment to fluoresce differently, revealing layers of text that are completely invisible to the naked eye. Suddenly, a page from a plain-looking prayer book could reveal the ghostly, precise geometry of a gear system hidden beneath the Psalms. It's like giving scholars a pair of magical glasses that allow them to see through time, peeling back the centuries to recover what was once thought lost forever. Yet this thrilling process of discovery is perpetually shadowed by a sobering reality. It is a desperate race against the clock. These fragile documents face a constant barrage of threats. Fluctuations in temperature and humidity cause vellum to expand and contract, cracking and flaking ink away. Fungal blooms and insect infestations can reduce a priceless manuscript to dust in a shockingly short time. Perhaps the most insidious threat is the slow, acidic decay of the iron gall ink itself, which can eventually eat through the very parchment it's written on, literally causing words to vanish into holes. For every document saved through careful conservation, countless others have been lost to fire, flood, or the simple tragedy of neglect. This lends an incredible urgency to the work of modern archivists, who are not just researchers but rescue workers, battling environmental decay and the sheer weight of time to pull these ideas back from the very brink of oblivion. Each successful recovery feels like receiving a message in a bottle from a distant past. When a new blueprint is deciphered, it doesn't just add a new machine to the list, it fundamentally deepens our understanding of the medieval mind. A single, previously overlooked drawing can force historians to redraw entire timelines of technological development, proving that a concept we thought was invented in the 1600s was actually in active use in the 1300s. It connects dots between disparate monasteries, showing how an innovation in one region was studied, adapted, and improved upon in another, revealing the hidden networks of knowledge exchange. Every time a new folio is scanned and its secrets revealed, it's as if another light switches on in a vast, dark room, gradually illuminating the astonishingly sophisticated and interconnected world of monastic engineering. We are, piece by fragile piece, reconstructing a lost chapter of human ingenuity, and with each new discovery, the story only grows more remarkable. The true test of any blueprint lies not on the page, but in the physical world. Does the machine actually work as intended? This is the question that drives a fascinating branch of historical research known as experimental archaeology, where modern engineers, historians, and craftsmen collaborate to breathe life back into these ancient designs. Their mission is to move beyond theory and into practice, using only the materials, tools, and techniques that would have been available to the original monastic inventors. This process is far more than a simple building project. It is a profound dialogue across the centuries, a way of communing with the minds of the past by engaging in the very same physical struggles and triumphs they experienced. The journey from parchment to working machine is rarely straightforward. The first challenge is perhaps the most humbling, learning to see the world through the eyes of a medieval craftsman. A modern engineer might look at a blueprint for a complex gear train and immediately calculate the precise dimensions needed for a computer-controlled lathe. The historical reconstructor must forget all of that. They must instead ask, how would a blacksmith of the 1300s have forged this iron? What kind of hand tools would a woodworker have used to carve these intricate wooden gears to ensure they meshed perfectly? This demands a radical shift in thinking, from the precision of micrometers to the skilled intuition of the human hand, guided by generations of traditional craftsmanship that has largely been lost to time. One of the most celebrated reconstruction projects involved the astronomical clock of Richard of Wallingford. A team in England spent years deciphering his complex manuscripts, which were filled with unique abbreviations and geometric notations that didn't conform to any modern standard. The team then had to source period-appropriate oak for the framing and hand-forge every single iron component in a charcoal-fired forge, precisely as it would have been done at St. Albans. The moment of truth came when they assembled the final gear train and released the weight. To their astonishment, the mechanism engaged smoothly. The gears turned, the model planets began their slow dance across the face of the clock, and the eclipse prediction function aligned with historical astronomical records. The machine didn't just work, it worked with a silent, majestic accuracy that left the modern experts in a state of awe, forced to completely recalibrate their estimation of medieval capabilities. Similar revelations have emerged from reconstructing the Cistercian water-powered sawmills. Teams working in France built a full-scale replica based on the monastic blueprints, situating it on a river with a similar flow to those the order would have used. Using only axes, adzes, and hand-forged nails, they constructed the massive water wheel and the complex system of wooden gears and cranks that converted its rotation into a reciprocating saw motion. When the sluice gate was opened and the water began to flow, the wheel turned with a deep, groaning authority. The gears engaged, and the saw blade began its powerful, rhythmic stroke, biting into a solid oak log with terrifying efficiency. The project demonstrated that the design was not only functional but highly effective, capable of producing perfectly cut planks at a rate that would have been unimaginable to a medieval carpenter working by hand. The roaring sound of the water and the screeching bite of the saw into timber offered a visceral, unforgettable experience of the industrial power these monasteries could harness. Perhaps the most subtle and delicate reconstructions involved the lens grinding machines. Here, the challenge was one of almost microscopic precision. Using the monastic designs, craftsmen recreated the treadle-powered lathes and polishing wheels. The process of grinding a single lens from a chunk of glass using only abrasive sands and powders was painstakingly slow, requiring days of patient, meticulous work. Yet, when finished and tested, these hand-ground lenses proved to be of exceptionally high quality, capable of clear magnification that rivaled early mass-produced lenses from the 17th century. This hands-on work revealed the incredible patience and skill of the monk opticians. It showed that their achievements were not accidental, but the result of a deeply refined, repeatable process, a true science of optics developed through relentless empirical experimentation and refinement. These reconstructions do more than just validate historical blueprints. They fundamentally change our relationship with the past. they transform these monastic inventors from vague, robed figures into tangible colleagues and masters of their craft. By facing the same material constraints, the warping of green wood, the unpredictable hardness of hand-forged iron, the challenge of achieving true mechanical precision without modern measuring tools, the modern reconstructors gain a deep, empathetic understanding of the problems these monks solved. They encounter the same moments of frustration and breakthrough, developing a profound respect for the intuitive engineering genius that could conceptualize such devices and then translate them into reality with such flawless execution. This process bridges not just centuries but minds, allowing us to experience the sheer intellectual thrill of medieval innovation firsthand, and in doing so, it forever banishes the condescending myth of a simple, untechnological past. This vast and vibrant exchange of ideas was made possible by the highly mobile nature of monastic life itself. A monk was rarely bound to a single location for his entire life. Orders would frequently transfer members between abbeys, sending a skilled scribe from England to assist a new foundation in Germany, or an experienced architect from France to consult on a building project in Italy. These traveling brothers were human data packets, carrying not only their personal expertise but also precious manuscripts, scrolls, and perhaps most importantly, the contents of their own meticulously trained memories. A monk who had spent years working in the scriptorium at Cluny in France would bring with him a mental library of architectural techniques, mechanical principles, and artistic styles that he could then share with his new brothers at a monastery in the Rhine Valley. This constant, deliberate circulation of skilled personnel was the lifeblood of the network, ensuring that knowledge did not stagnate but was continuously cross-pollinated across great distances. The primary vehicle for this long-distance collaboration was the humble yet revolutionary practice of manuscript copying. When a monastery produced a particularly valuable or innovative blueprint, it wasn't hoarded as a secret. Instead, it was treated as a treasure to be shared. The scriptorium would set to work creating authorized copies of the design. These were not quick sketches, they were painstakingly accurate duplicates, often made on high-quality vellum, with every measurement, annotation, and illustrative detail faithfully reproduced. These duplicate sets of plans would then be entrusted to traveling monks, envoys, or even trusted merchants making a journey, destined for the library of a sister monastery hundreds of miles away. This created a distributed, decentralized repository of technological knowledge. The loss of a precious original in a fire at one abbey did not mean the permanent loss of the innovation, because a copy likely existed safely in a scriptorium in a different region or even a different country. We can see the stunning results of this collaboration etched into the blueprints themselves. A design for a water pump uncovered in a Spanish monastery might feature a distinctly Islamic-inspired gear mechanism, a technology that likely traveled north from the sophisticated workshops of Al-Andalus through the scholarly exchanges in cities like Toledo. Similarly, the architectural plans for the Great Dome of a Byzantine church might find echoes in the structural solutions drafted for a Norman cathedral, suggesting a flow of engineering knowledge through monastic channels that bypassed the political and religious tensions of the secular world. These documents are palimpsests of influence, their layered details telling a silent story of ideas moving across continents, adapted and improved upon by each new community that received them. This system functioned as a remarkably effective early form of intellectual peer review. A new design sent from one monastery to another wasn't merely filed away, it was studied, tested, and often critiqued. The receiving monks might attempt to build a small-scale model of the device, or they might use their own mathematical knowledge to verify the calculations in the margins. They would then send back a response, sometimes in the form of a revised version of the blueprint with suggested improvements or adaptations for local materials. This collaborative refinement turned the entire monastic network into a giant, slow-motion research and development laboratory, where the best ideas were honed and perfected through the collective intelligence of a continent-wide community of scholar engineers. It was a testament to a shared belief that knowledge, especially knowledge that could alleviate labor or better understand God's creation, was a common good to be advanced together, transcending the parochial boundaries that so often defined the medieval world. So why did such a revolutionary body of work remain in the shadows for so long, a whispered secret rather than celebrated history? The answer lies in a perfect storm of deliberate secrecy, catastrophic loss, and the simple, persistent biases of how we choose to tell our own story. First and foremost was the ingrained culture of discretion within the monastic orders themselves. These communities were designed to be insular, their most profound workings shielded from the outside world. The advanced technological knowledge contained in their archives was not considered public property. It was a form of specialized, sacred capital, developed for the specific spiritual and practical needs of the community. Sharing it widely could be seen as a breach of their vows of humility, or, worse, could draw the unwanted attention of powerful secular forces or religious rivals. This wasn't mere paranoia, it was a pragmatic survival strategy honed over centuries of instability, ensuring their most valuable intellectual assets remained protected within the order. This protective secrecy was then brutally compounded by the sheer physical destruction of the repositories that housed this knowledge. The 16th century Protestant Reformation was a watershed moment of catastrophic loss, as waves of dissolution orders swept across Europe. Monasteries were systematically dismantled, their lands seized, and their inhabitants dispersed. In this climate, libraries were not carefully catalogued and relocated. They were often the first targets, seen as bastions of papist ideology. Precious manuscripts were burned for their bindings, used as waste paper, or simply scattered to the winds. The dissolution was followed by centuries of further conflict: the 30 Years' War, the Napoleonic Wars, and the World Wars of the 20th century, each conflict consuming more of these ancient sites in fire and bombardment. Each time a library like that of Monte Cassino was reduced to rubble, an untold number of unique blueprints, the only records of specific innovations, were erased from existence forever, turning entire lineages of technological thought into historical dead ends. Even when documents did survive these upheavals, they faced another, more subtle form of oblivion: the selective focus of historical scholarship. For generations, the grand narrative of history was written as a chronicle of politics, power, and great men. Scholars sifting through surviving medieval manuscripts were primarily looking for theological treatises, royal chronicles, or literary works. A folio filled with intricate diagrams of gears and pulleys, annotated with mathematical notations, would have been easily dismissed as a technical manual or a curious trifle, unworthy of serious academic study compared to a theological discourse or a piece of poetry. This intellectual bias meant that these documents, when they were encountered at all, were often miscatalogued, ignored, or left to languish in archives under labels that concealed their true significance, their secrets waiting for a generation of researchers who would finally know what they were looking at. The specialized, often encrypted, nature of the content itself created another formidable barrier. These were not simple picture books, they were complex technical documents written by and for experts. Without a deep understanding of medieval Latin abbreviations, Gothic geometry, period mechanical principles, and the theological symbolism often used to encode information, the blueprints were essentially written in a lost language. A historian of literature might see a beautiful illustration of a water wheel surrounded by vines. Only an engineer familiar with the context would recognize the vines as a clever diagram of a camshaft's operation, their curling patterns precisely encoding timing and lift sequences. This required a fusion of expertise that simply didn't exist in traditional academic departments, a bridging of the gap between the humanities and the sciences that has only recently become commonplace. It is this very interdisciplinary approach that has finally begun to pull these archives back into the light. The modern rediscovery is being led by teams where a historian's paleographic skills are combined with an engineer's understanding of mechanics and a materials scientist's ability to use multispectral imaging to see through time. They are the ones who can look at a faded page and see not just a drawing but a functional machine, understanding the problem it was designed to solve and the brilliance of its solution. This collaborative spirit is what has finally allowed us to decode the hidden language of these designs, to appreciate them not as quaint curiosities, but as the sophisticated engineering documents they truly are. Their long obscurity is a powerful reminder that history is not just about what is written in the official records, but often about what was quietly drawn in the margins, waiting for us to develop the right lens through which to see it. This hidden river of monastic knowledge, flowing silently through the centuries, eventually surfaced to nourish the minds of the most celebrated inventors in history. The iconic figures of the Renaissance and the Industrial Revolution, long portrayed as solitary geniuses who conjured their ideas from nothing, now appear in a new light, as brilliant inheritors who stood upon the shoulders of forgotten monastic giants. The evidence for this connection is not always a direct, smoking gun manuscript handoff, but rather a compelling trail of conceptual echoes and mechanical resemblances that are simply too striking to be mere coincidence. It suggests a slow, subterranean migration of ideas, where the groundbreaking work of medieval monk engineers was absorbed into the broader intellectual culture, becoming a foundational layer upon which later revolutions were built. Consider the legendary notebooks of Leonardo da Vinci. His pages are a breathtaking whirlwind of invention, filled with designs for gear systems, water pumps, and intricate automata that seem to leap from his imagination fully formed. Yet, when we place these drawings side by side with earlier monastic blueprints, the parallels become undeniable. Leonardo's studies for automated theatrical devices, where figures would move through a series of cams and levers, bear a remarkable kinship to the automated bell-ringing mechanisms and moving figures found in monastic clock designs. His intricate designs for water-lifting machines, with their complex arrays of gears and suction pumps, share a clear conceptual DNA with the hydraulic systems perfected by the Cistercians for their mills and workshops. It is highly probable that Leonardo, in his relentless hunt for knowledge, encountered copied manuscripts or technical fragments from dissolved monasteries, absorbing their principles and then refining them with his own unparalleled observational genius. He wasn't just inventing, he was iterating, building upon a centuries-old engineering tradition that had been quietly advancing in the shadows. This lineage becomes even more apparent when we jump forward to the dawn of the Industrial Revolution and a figure like James Watt. His separate condenser, the pivotal improvement that made the steam engine truly efficient, is a story of precision engineering and the methodical solution of a mechanical problem. This mindset, a systematic, almost mathematical approach to overcoming an inefficiency, is the direct intellectual descendant of the monastic engineer scribes who calculated gear ratios to the smallest fraction and drafted solutions for reducing friction and maximizing power output. The very concept of using a mechanical device to automate a labor-intensive process, central to the industrial age, was not invented in the cotton mills of Manchester. It was perfected centuries earlier in the water-powered sawmills and automated harvesters of monastic granges. The industrialists didn't dream up the idea of the factory. They scaled up a model of integrated, machine-driven production that the great abbeys had been operating for hundreds of years. This continuity forces a fundamental rewrite of our standard historical narrative. The Renaissance can no longer be seen as a brilliant, clean break from a dark and ignorant past, a sudden rebirth of classical learning that erased the medieval millennium. Instead, it emerges as a period of brilliant synthesis and amplification. The recovered knowledge of Greece and Rome, flowing into Europe through translation, acted like a sudden burst of oxygen on the glowing embers of native medieval innovation. The meticulous, practical engineering of the monasteries provided the working models and the proof of concept, while the rediscovered classical texts offered new theoretical frameworks and mathematical languages to explain why these machines worked so well. The Renaissance didn't replace medieval technology. It married it to classical theory, creating an explosive new potential for advancement. Recognizing this deep continuity does not diminish the achievements of a Da Vinci or a Watt. Their genius remains undeniable. What it does is enrich our understanding of how innovation truly works. It shows that technological progress is rarely a series of isolated lightning strikes of genius. It is more often a slow, collective process of accretion, a vast and collaborative human conversation stretching across generations. The monastic inventors were the vital keepers of that conversation through a tumultuous period, ensuring that the language of mechanics and the principles of engineering were not lost. They passed the torch, and the great minds of the Renaissance and Industrial Revolution were there to receive it, raising it high for all the world to finally see. Their legendary achievements mark not the beginning of a story, but a magnificent and long overdue climax to one that had been unfolding in secret for centuries. The task of preserving these irreplaceable documents today is a race against time, fought with a combination of cutting-edge technology and age-old meticulous care. Imagine the ideal environment for a 900-year-old piece of vellum: constant, cool temperatures, specific and unwavering humidity levels, and protection from any direct light that could accelerate its decay. This is the reality within the high-security, climate-controlled vaults of modern archives and libraries, where these fragile blueprints now reside. Each document is treated as a unique patient, often housed in a custom-made protective casing of acid-free paper and stored flat in specialized drawers to prevent any stress or curling. The handling procedures are strict, requiring white gloves and a reverence once afforded only to religious relics, because that is precisely what these technical manuscripts have become. Yet, even with these advanced protocols, immense challenges persist. The very materials that ensured their survival now threaten them. Iron gall ink, celebrated for its permanence, is chemically volatile. Over centuries, its acidic nature can literally eat through the parchment, causing words and diagrams to vanish into lacy holes in a process known as ink corrosion. Conservators face a nerve-wracking dilemma. How do you intervene to halt this decay without causing further damage to the incredibly delicate surface? Similarly, the animal skin vellum itself can become brittle and desiccated, or conversely, susceptible to mold in the wrong conditions. Each conservation decision is a high-stakes puzzle, requiring a deep understanding of medieval chemistry and modern material science, and there are far fewer experts with this specialized knowledge than there are documents in desperate need of their help. Compounding these technical hurdles is the relentless challenge of funding. This is not glamorous work that easily attracts large donors or public grants. The painstaking process of conserving a single manuscript page can take hundreds of hours and cost thousands of dollars, a difficult equation for institutions already operating on strained budgets. Furthermore, the work of digitization, while crucial for global access, is itself expensive and resource-intensive. High-resolution photographic equipment, multispectral imaging scanners, and the server space to host these massive digital files all represent a significant and ongoing financial investment. Many of these preservation projects rely on precarious patchworks of short-term grants and international partnerships, making long-term planning a constant struggle. This is where a powerful and heartening trend emerges: global collaboration. No single institution holds all the pieces to this puzzle. A university in Germany might possess the advanced imaging technology needed to see through a damaged page, while a small monastery in Italy holds the original document, and a team of scholars in the United States has the linguistic and engineering expertise to interpret what is revealed. International projects now routinely bring together conservators, historians, scientists, and religious orders, pooling their resources and knowledge in a shared mission to safeguard this common heritage. These partnerships break down traditional academic and geographic silos, creating a united front against the threats of time and neglect, ensuring that the brilliant light of medieval innovation is not extinguished but shared with the world. This profound spiritual drive fundamentally redefined the very purpose of technology for these monastic inventors. They did not see a divide between the workshop and the chapel. Instead, they viewed the meticulous act of engineering as a form of prayer in itself, a physical manifestation of their desire to understand the orderly and magnificent universe they believed was crafted by a divine architect. A beautifully drawn gear was not merely a component for transferring power, it was a reflection of celestial harmony, its perfect teeth meshing in a rhythm that echoed the music of the spheres. This worldview transformed every calculation, every stroke of the drafting pen, into a devotional act, a way to honor God by engaging with the logical and mathematical principles embedded in His creation. We can see this sacred intention inscribed directly onto the blueprints. It's common to find delicate Latin phrases woven into the margins of a technical drawing, such as ad majorem Dei gloriam, or for the greater glory of God, a powerful reminder that this machine's ultimate purpose was to serve a higher calling. Other designs might feature a small cross or a Christogram subtly integrated into the structure of a water wheel's axle or the housing of a clock, a constant visual cue that this work was consecrated. One remarkable set of plans for an automated bell ringer even begins with a quote from the Book of Psalms, "7 times a day I praise you," directly linking the mechanical function of the device to its spiritual raison d'etre. These weren't afterthoughts or decorative flourishes, they were foundational statements of purpose, framing the entire engineering endeavor within a context of worship and service. This ethos produced a unique set of priorities that stands in stark contrast to the forces that drive most modern innovation. For the monastic community, the primary measures of a technology's success were not profit, efficiency, or market disruption. The key questions were far more profound. Does this device bring us closer to God? Does it free a brother from debilitating toil so he may devote more energy to prayer and contemplation? Does it help our community become more self-sufficient and sustainable, allowing us to better live out our vows? This resulted in technologies that were inherently humane and community-focused. A mechanical harvester was celebrated because it alleviated the exhausting labor that left a monk too weary for evening prayers, not because it increased surplus grain for trade. This was innovation guided by a moral compass where the value was measured in spiritual currency and the well-being of the community, not in financial gain. This thoughtful approach even extended to a form of early ethical debate about the role of technology itself. Within the safety of their walls, monks grappled with questions we are only now confronting with urgency in the age of AI and automation. Was it acceptable to automate the sacred call to prayer with a machine, or did that diminish the personal devotion of the human ringer? Could a labor-saving device in the fields inadvertently foster a spirit of idleness or comfort that was antithetical to their vows of simplicity and hard work? The marginal notes in some blueprints reveal these internal dialogues, showing a community deeply engaged with the potential spiritual consequences of their own ingenuity. They understood that technology was never neutral. It always carried the values of its creators and risked unintended effects on the human spirit. The legacy of this purpose-driven innovation offers a powerful mirror for our own technological age. We live in a world often obsessed with progress for its own sake, where the question, "Can we build it?" frequently drowns out the more important question of, "Should we build it?" The monastic approach challenges us to recenter our own innovations around human flourishing, sustainability, and a deeper sense of purpose. They remind us that the most meaningful technologies are those that serve our humanity, that free us to pursue higher callings, and that honor the world we inhabit, rather than those that simply seek to dominate it or extract from it. In their thoughtful fusion of faith and mechanics, we find an invitation to build a future where technology is not our master, but our servant, a tool for creating a better, more thoughtful, and more devoted world. And so, despite the incredible revelations we've already uncovered, the most thrilling chapter in this story may still be waiting to be written. The sobering truth is that for every monastic archive that has been meticulously studied, there are dozens more that remain largely unexplored, their contents only guessed at from fragmentary catalogues or local legend. Many of these collections are not lost in the dramatic sense. They are simply sleeping, tucked away in the back rooms of modern-day religious houses, stored in the climate-controlled basements of national libraries, or even hidden in plain sight within the personal collections of old aristocratic families who once acquired them during the dissolution of the monasteries centuries ago. These repositories are not empty, they are unread, a vast continent of uncharted intellectual territory holding the potential to completely rewrite our understanding of the medieval mind. The tools we now have to explore this territory are nothing short of revolutionary, turning what was once a painstaking, analog process of leafing through dusty folios into a high-tech treasure hunt. Ground-penetrating radar, for instance, allows archaeologists to peer through solid stone floors and behind ancient walls without ever lifting a trowel. There have already been tantalizing hints from surveys at sites like the ruins of Revolx Abbey in England, suggesting the presence of previously unknown subterranean chambers, perhaps the very scriptorium storage vaults or workshops where these blueprints were originally used and then hidden for safekeeping. The prospect of physically discovering a sealed room, untouched for 500 years and filled with rolled vellum plans, is the stuff of an historian's wildest dreams, and it is now a tangible possibility. Even more transformative is the digital revolution in manuscript studies. The ongoing, massive effort to digitize entire library collections is creating a global, virtual scriptorium. A scholar in Tokyo can now scrutinize a high-resolution scan of a manuscript from a monastery in Portugal, zooming in on a faded marginal note that a researcher a generation ago would have needed a costly travel grant and special permission just to glimpse. More importantly, advanced algorithmic analysis is being deployed to find the needles in these vast digital haystacks, researchers are training artificial intelligence to recognize the unique visual patterns of technical drawings, the precise circles of gear diagrams, the straight lines of architectural plans, even when they are obscured within religious texts or disguised as decorative art. This digital prospecting is already yielding results, identifying previously miscatalogued documents that, upon closer human inspection, turn out to be incredible finds, like a new fragment of a watermill design or a previously unknown sketch for a mechanical loom. This global, collaborative effort is fundamentally changing the nature of the search. It is no longer a solitary pursuit but a worldwide, crowdsourced endeavor. Online databases allow a materials scientist in Boston to compare the ink composition of a blueprint from a Spanish monastery with one from a German abbey, potentially tracing the movement of a specific monk or the exchange of a particular technique across Europe. Digital reconstruction software can take a fire-damaged, shrunken, and warped piece of vellum and virtually flatten it, restore its original dimensions, and bring its faded ink back to life, recovering a design that was once considered a total loss. Each tiny fragment that is recovered and digitized becomes a permanent part of the human record, immune to the physical decay that threatens the original, and available for every future generation to study and reinterpret. This palpable sense of unfinished exploration of history as an open book rather than a closed one injects an incredible energy into the field. Every researcher knows that the next scan, the next radar survey, or the next overlooked box in an attic could be the one that changes everything. It could be the complete set of plans for a lost perpetual motion machine designed by a visionary monk, a detailed schematic for a pre-Gutenberg printing press, or a medical text with illustrations of surgical instruments far more advanced than we thought possible. The full story of monastic innovation is not a completed manuscript sitting on a shelf. It is a living, breathing narrative that we are actively composing with every new discovery. We are not just learning about the past, we are in a dynamic conversation with it, and the next response from the monks, hidden for centuries, could be the most astonishing one yet. Perhaps the most striking lesson from these medieval inventors is their profound sense of purpose. For the monastic engineer, a new machine was never an end in itself. It was a tool for achieving a higher goal, whether that was freeing up time for prayer, ensuring the community's self-sufficiency, or creating an object that reflected the divine order of the universe. This stands in stark contrast to a modern tech landscape often driven by the pursuit of novelty for its own sake or the relentless chase for market disruption and shareholder value. The monk's first question was not, "Will this make money?" or "Is this cutting edge?" but rather, "Will this help us live a better, more devoted life?" This fundamental reframing of technologies, why from an engine of profit to an instrument of human flourishing, is a powerful invitation for today's creators to anchor their work in a deeper, more meaningful set of values. This sense of purpose naturally gave rise to a philosophy of sustainability and appropriate scale. These inventors were masters of working within constraints, seeing limitations not as obstacles but as a creative canvas. They used local materials, stone from a nearby quarry, oak from their own forests, iron smelted from regional bog ore, which minimized the environmental cost of transportation and created a deep connection between the technology and its place. Their designs show an inherent aversion to waste. Every component had a purpose, and devices were built to be repaired and maintained for generations, not replaced after a few years of use. This stands as a powerful antidote to our modern culture of planned obsolescence and disposable consumer goods, offering a model for a circular economy that was practiced for centuries within the monastery walls. Furthermore, the monastic approach to automation was nuanced and deeply humane. Their goal was rarely to eliminate human labor entirely, but to alleviate its most burdensome and repetitive forms. The water-powered sawmill didn't put the carpenters out of work. It freed them from the exhausting, mind-numbing task of hand-sawing beams, allowing them to focus their skill and creativity on the intricate joinery and beautiful finishing that defined Gothic architecture. Technology was used to elevate human work, not erase it. This offers a crucial perspective for our own era of anxiety over artificial intelligence and automation, suggesting that the best use of technology is to augment human potential and free us to engage in more meaningful, creative, and interpersonal tasks, rather than pursuing a fully automated future for its own sake. Their collaborative, cross-pollinating method of innovation is another vital takeaway. The monastic world was a breathtakingly open system for its time. A brother in a Yorkshire abbey could study a blueprint based on an Arabic translation of a Greek text, adapt it using a local crafting technique, and then share the improved design with a monastery in Burgundy. They were relentless remixers and integrators of knowledge, blind to the artificial boundaries of discipline or culture that often silo modern research and development. This demonstrates that true breakthroughs rarely happen in isolation. They occur at the intersections of different fields, cultures, and ways of thinking. For a modern innovator, this translates into actively seeking diverse teams, fostering interdisciplinary collaboration, and looking for inspiration in unexpected places far outside one's own industry or area of expertise. Ultimately, the greatest legacy of these hidden engineers is a timeless reminder that technology is never neutral. It is always imbued with the values and worldview of its creators. The monks encoded their values of community, sustainability, devotion, and humility directly into their machines. We have the same choice today. We can choose to build technologies that prioritize extraction, attention hijacking, and isolation, or we can consciously choose to build systems that promote human connection, environmental regeneration, and thoughtful, purposeful living. The blueprints from the monastery archives offer more than just fascinating machines. They offer a moral compass for innovation, guiding us toward a future where our tools don't just make us more powerful, but truly and meaningfully better. These remarkable documents, carefully preserved in the quiet shadows of monastic life, reveal a truth far more profound than simply a collection of old machines. They unveil a complete rethinking of what the medieval world was actually capable of, a hidden narrative of progress that hums with intellectual energy and creative brilliance. For too long, we've pictured this era through a lens of darkness and stagnation, but these blueprints force that lens to shatter. They show us communities where the rhythm of prayer and the rhythm of the gear train were not in conflict, but were two parts of a harmonious whole, a unified effort to understand and honor the intricate mechanics of a universe they believed was divinely designed. What makes this legacy so powerful is its enduring relevance. The challenges these monk engineers grappled with: how to harness natural forces sustainably, how to use automation to enhance human life rather than diminish it, how to ensure technology serves a deeper purpose than mere efficiency, are the very questions we confront today. Their thoughtful, value-driven approach offers a timeless blueprint for innovation itself. They remind us that the most meaningful advancements are those that are rooted in a clear ethical foundation, that prioritize the well-being of the community and the health of the world around us. In their quiet scriptoriums, they were not just building machines, they were building a philosophy of technology that balanced ambition with wisdom, and that is a lesson we desperately need to rediscover. As the digital age allows us to peer deeper into these forgotten archives, pulling more of their secrets into the light, we are not just completing a historical record. We are engaging in a conversation across the centuries with some of history's most insightful and humble inventors. Each new discovery adds another piece to this magnificent puzzle, challenging our assumptions and inspiring a new generation of creators to look for inspiration in the most unexpected places. The story of these monastic archives is ultimately a story about the unbreakable human spirit of curiosity, a testament to the idea that the drive to learn, to build, and to understand is a fundamental part of who we are, a light that can be sheltered but never truly extinguished. Let these forgotten engineers inspire your own curiosity. Which of these incredible blueprints did you find the most astonishing? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this journey into the secrets hidden beneath history, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss our next exploration. If this journey into the hidden world of monastic ingenuity sparked your curiosity, you can help keep this channel exploring the forgotten corners of history. Liking this video and sharing it with fellow history enthusiasts tells the YouTube algorithm that these deep dives into the past are worth supporting, making it possible for us to bring you even more fascinating content. Subscribing to the channel and tapping that notification bell is the absolute best way to ensure you never miss out on our next adventure, whether we're uncovering lost cities, deciphering ancient texts, or investigating other technological mysteries. Your voice is a vital part of this community of explorers, so we're genuinely eager to hear which of these astonishing blueprints resonated with you the most. Was it the breathtaking complexity of Richard of Wallingford's astronomical clock, a medieval computer built from gears and faith? Or perhaps the raw, practical power of the Cistercian sawmills that quietly revolutionized medieval industry? Let us know your thoughts and personal favorites down in the comments. Your insights often lead to incredible discussions and even shape the topics for future videos. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for your time and your curiosity. Until our next investigation into the extraordinary stories buried by time, never stop questioning, never stop exploring, and never stop seeking out the wonders hidden just beneath the surface of the everyday world.